Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We are here today and we're going to be talking about direct mail. Sarah Montana here with BizBabes and Agent Advisor. I've got Ryan Kay and Dan Fine with Lettr Labs. So let's get started.
Yeah, so direct mail, I think it's interesting. Marketing has this really weird way to think about what works and what doesn't. We tend to be a bunch of followers when it comes to marketing, meaning everybody wants to follow the trend. So
as jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, if you think about like the product adoption curve or the idea adoption curve, you have these early adopters who go and try new stuff out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You have kind of followers, that early follower that says, hey, I heard somebody that is a leading adopter trying this, so I want to try it out. They kind of learn from their approach. You have the early adopters, the late adopters, and at the very end are the skeptics. And I think a lot of times we look at marketing and we think that's just a one-time thing. Like direct mail was super huge. And I mean, I'm sure that there was at some point there were early adopters of direct mail, like before all three of us were born. But at some point, direct mail went through its early adoption, mass adoption, and started to fall off because there were reasons. I mean, email or search engine marketing or social marketing became more viable for a lot of different reasons. It could have been cost. It could have been it's easier to track. It could be just tracking cost at all. And yet, so we try to, the crowd follows that sequence, which is smart. You do what's working right now, you engage in what's working right now. But what people a lot of times miss out on is that just because something isn't as cool anymore or had problems in the past, as people leave it, it might actually become the new cool. We'll call it retro. You have like, you have the new cool trendy marketing and you have the retro marketing, and both of them are viable. And a lot of times I think the retro, like billboards and like direct mail, is coming back into flow because companies like you guys have solved some of the problems that were there that led us away from it. And that's probably the way to really kind of kick this off and talk about. Maybe we start with, why is direct mail kind of dead or viewed as not effective in the eyes of how it used to be? And I think we go with postcard mailers, 5,000. I remember when I started out, like Sarah doesn't even know this. When I first started out, this would have been 20 years ago. Some of the first websites I built and web marketing I did was for 5,001 postcards. That was like the shtick. You could get 5,001 postcards printed up, mailed out to everybody. And the big direct mail house here in town that would mail you all kinds of stupid crap, like a key to a car and a key to a house and like all kinds of weird stuff that they would send out in direct mail. And they made tons of cash using direct mail until it reached the point that our mailboxes were full of spam, which effectively was just junk mail is what we called it. And then the web came. We moved away from that. And now, like, we just got the mail today and there's almost no advertisements in our mailbox from the last 5 days, like nothing. And so like direct mail was dead or is dead right now because there were some inherent problems. I think number one I had on here was a low response rate, meaning like people weren't engaging off of it. You had to send tens of thousands of things.
And over and over.
Right? That's probably number one. Number two, let's see, what else did we have on there? So you had to send a huge blast, which had to do with the low response rate.
And there wasn't a way to like segment everyone out. So you're just like blasting an area. And so, you know, depending on what your target is, the unintended recipients, there's unintended recipients.
Right, exactly. And Ryan, well said. I mean, the volumes that most people are familiar with sending out and the reason why as the low response rates, that's primarily why you saw a big decline in more traditional like marketing channels as everything started to move online. So as you said, mailing is becoming cool again, right? But it's also evolving. And people need to understand that as it evolves, you need to just keep up on how you can leverage new tools, right? And that's a lot of what we focus on here at Lettr Labs. We've got some really, really interesting things that we're able to help people do to maximize their campaigns, right? It's nothing like it was when we're talking about direct mail.
And I don't think it's just direct mail. I think you could say that with most marketing things. The old school structure wasn't It wasn't the vehicle that was being sent wasn't the core problem, whether that was an email or whether it was a postcard or whether it was, a TV commercial. It was, number one, untargeted. You were buying data of the whole town. The ability to segment and really target the data was weak. Therefore, you were shotgunning everybody, which led you to a very generic message because you didn't know who you were going to engage. And so therefore your message had to be extremely vague. And then finally, because of that leads you back to tracking. You couldn't actually track the response rate or what happened because once again, you were just sending everybody to a website.
It was almost like brand awareness is really what you were
QR codes didn't exist. Texting a phone number didn't exist. It was so expensive to build a website. You wouldn't build 10 websites. You'd just build one. Now it's so cheap to build a website. You could build a website like a subdomain for every person you sent to, if that's what it took to get proper tracking. But back then, that's probably the easiest way to think about it. Same thing with cold calling. You'd buy a completely unqualified list. Therefore, you would be calling everybody. Your pitch and your message would be very generic because you didn't know who you were about ready to talk to. And therefore, the effectiveness was really low.
The age-old saying, right? If you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to nobody.
Yeah,
exactly. The word
that
efficacy came
definitely
to my
rings
mind
true.
as well as you were thinking about that. But I think of that in the social realm. We think of what's popular and what's going viral and all those things. But what I think is interesting is you might see people going out there and getting 1 million likes or, thousands and thousands of views. But what we don't know is on the back end of that is it converting into paying customers? And so that's what I have found to be so valuable in utilizing handwritten note campaigns is because I'm actually seeing the results. It's not just like, oh, I'm popular or people know my name. I'm actually seeing the results from those campaigns.
Yeah. And I think you can probably take that of all marketing or sales, whatever it is. You could divide up everything into the quantity game or the quality game. So the problem is both of those are potentially viable. You can do both quantity and quality, but we only see and hear the people doing quantity games. Therefore, we assume it's working. So for instance, you might not know that you could run a TV commercial just to a handful of people. You would only know it if you were those handful of people that were deeply targeted with Hulu. But what you think is working is the one you see all the time, which would be the broad-based TV ad that everybody sees.
It's the same way with like direct mail though. Like, for me, I'm a real estate agent and the direct mail pieces that I do get, they're all doing the same thing. It's all very generic. It's, here's the market report of what's going on in your area. And it is not specific to me. It doesn't make me want to like take an action or do something, but yet you think it's working because, oh, well, if I'm going to do direct mail, that's what all the other agents are doing. So I guess that must be what's working. And I don't think that that's actually the case.
Well, some interesting conversations I have recently about, as you mentioned, Ryan, social media and what you are able to target, doing those big volume plays, just awareness campaigns, right? I don't know if you've noticed recently, right, when you're searching the internet, that you're often asked to allow your keys to be tracked. So cookies aren't just delicious snacks. They're a method for marketers and people who host those websites to understand where you've been so they can target you based on interests, right? So there have been actually some changes recently that is disrupting the whole marketing industry. Anything online just wasn't what it used to be. Now it still can be very effective, don't get me wrong, but we're seeing the direct mail come back specifically because it's very difficult to target in the same ways for the same cost. Costs are increasing, and the data is becoming less effective, right, quality than it used to be. So there's some really big picture changes that have happened recently, why people are going back to the traditional methods, or at least using them to supplement in what they're doing. And I came across
that
really,
right there, using them to supplement brings us to like, let's start with this one key point. There isn't one marketing approach. There's not one best mark. Like we all want it where it's like, I just do social.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, said nobody ever. Nobody just does. Like I do a significant amount of email marketing that I pair with social marketing, that I pair with webinars, that I pair with other things. The downside is it gets hard to know exactly what the source of like the return is, because I've touched somebody 5 different times in 5 different ways. But in actuality, that's really what it takes, like to actually run a successful business and build a client acquisition engine, is that you're going to be getting my email and also seeing me on social and also getting a direct mail piece from me, etc. And so that concept of, well, I'm just going to do social and that's going to be the secret ticket. Now, on the flip side, luckily everybody is like that. We're a bunch of followers, which means that you can do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. And a lot of times that will actually be more effective, more cost effective, etc., because you're not surrounded by all the noise.
Having a well-rounded marketing strategy. I think that's interesting of like what actually got me into utilizing handwritten notes is, you know, we both come from a marketing background. And so I'm always looking for unique ways to do things. And he's like the email marketer. And all of a sudden we got something in the mail and it was a handwritten note, and it kind of caught both of us by surprise of like, whoa, what is this? Like, because it's right now, you're just not getting that type of actual engagement or like personalized messaging. And that's really how it came about. Is it happened to us as someone was utilizing it as part of their well-rounded marketing strategy. I think they were also targeting us online and doing some other things, but the handwritten note is what caught my attention.
Because that marketer was doing a good job. As Ryan said, you know, choosing multiple different channels. And a fun stat for you guys, actually, the United States Postal Service, they produce a report every year because, you know, it's their job to understand who's sending what types of mail, where they're sending it. It's a very lengthy report. The actual facts are is that you can actually determine the average amount of handwritten letters that a person would receive, and it's shockingly low. That's why when you see something like this in the mailbox, it just jumps out at you. Most people, when I tell them that these stats are like, yeah, the only person that writes me a handwritten letter anymore might be a family member, right? So the actual statistic is that the average American receives 1 piece every 3 months, which is, I have this pie chart that I show clients in like comparison to what we call the noise, right? In that same time period, you might receive 10,000 emails. You might be presented with 40,000 advertisements that are built into a web page that you pass on the street. So in terms of the experience of how unique it is, the sliver on the pie graph, you can't even see it. That's how absurd it is. So as you said, Ryan, doing things that other people aren't doing is going to give you a lot of visibility, and it's very effective. And one more thing I would add in terms of matching up that unique experience, and the pivotal thing that changed that's helped direct mail is being able to bridge the gap between an analog experience and a digital experience. So what I mean by that specifically is there was a recent event, right, that we all went through that allowed people to start utilizing QR codes. They've been around for decades, but nobody really used them. When COVID-19 hit and we all have gone through this experience, you know, you go out to a restaurant, there's a QR code. I can't come across anybody this day that does not know how to use it. So that opened up the floodgates to marry these two together and use direct mail to actually loop back into other digital channels, which it sounds like you guys are already doing. You've had success with it. It's a really big change for the better.
Well, and I mean, we did that even with door hangers. Same thing. Door hangers are you could take door hangers and direct mail and put them in the same bucket of, there used to be tons of door hangers. Again, gosh, forever ago, did the initial design work on this door hanger coupon thing that I was doing marketing for a company on. And that was so long ago. And at that point, every day there would be a new hanger on your door. It was nonstop door hangers, right? And for whatever reason, because the cost to perform it, the physical labor, the physical printing because the costs go up in comparison to sending one email, we assume that that means, oh, that's not as effective or scalable as something else. And so just one of the ways that I like to think about marketing, there's a great book you can read. It's called How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. If you haven't read that book, phenomenal book, but really the gist of it is the cost of marketing has to do with how much does it cost me to acquire one customer. And so if you take email as a good example, hey, it doesn't cost me very much to buy an email list. It doesn't cost me very much to send emails, but when I divide it by the very low number of customers I might get, the cost to acquire each customer might actually be higher than physically going and knocking a door. And the way that you solve the hanging or direct mail or whatever is, it's the cost times how many you have to do. And so what you want to do is make it so you can actually send fewer cards per customer acquired, or do fewer door hangers than customer acquired, which is a factor of targeting, getting a really good list. Number two, understanding empathy. Do I know what it is about those people, what they're thinking? Content. Am I writing some content that's actually good, that's going to call attention and get them excited? And then call to action. Do I have somewhere for them to go to get something to engage? And we think it's, oh, I just need something pretty. I'm just going to send a bunch of them. And then we go, it doesn't work. Well, I guess direct mail is dead. And you're like, no, you should be able to send, like, you've done direct mail campaigns with what, 10?
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about this is, Ryan in his coaching, he always tells me, like, hey, you need to do things that don't scale. Like, try something that you can't scale because it's what other people aren't willing to do. And, I know I went to a training years ago that as an agent, like, write 10 handwritten notes a day and your business will explode and you'll never need to have another lead again. But writing 10 handwritten notes a day is a giant pain in the neck. And so I love this concept where you can take something that technically is very difficult to scale, but with the right tools and services available, you can scale it, but you can also make it super narrow. So if you only need to be targeting this 10 people in this, small neighborhood or these small, certain demographic, you can.
I think that's the fallacy right now. Scale and speed. We are so aggressively looking to get really big, really fast. I think Gary Vee had a video on this just last week, and he's like, or a couple of weeks ago, that was like, the reason why people struggle being successful isn't because being successful at marketing or sales isn't possible. It's because they're so geared up to get really big, really fast, that they then fail. And the reason is because if you can do it at 10, it will work at 100. So meaning, like, if I was going to make 1,000 cold calls, I would start with 10. I would make those 10 calls. I would analyze them and say, okay, which ones work? Now, how could I make just another 10 of calls to just that person saying that one thing? And now I would do 50 and then 100 and then 1,000, but I may never actually even have to get to 1,000 because there's a lot of people who've gotten really rich off of sending 10 things. And you take the handwritten note thing and you go, oh, I wrote 10 handwritten notes and it didn't work. Cool. Then who did you send them to? Who was your target? What was the messaging? What was the call to action? Because you just threw out the concept when really it was a content problem and a targeting problem. And I think that's really where we're at with direct mail, because even if you buy a service like you guys have, which is amazing, you have the ability to get very targeted, send even just one piece of mail. You have the ability to buy a database and load it of very specific people, changing the picture that's on it, but still, you still have to nail down, who am I sending to? Why am I sending to them? What am I going to say that's going to engage them? And what do I want them to do next?
Right. And all those things are definitely factors, Ryan. There are different places where you need to make these pivotal decisions, right? Number one is going to be, like you said, who are you sending it to? Meaning the most basic targeting, identifying the addresses, making sure that the people you're reaching out to, generally speaking, fit the audience that you think that you're providing value to. Now, come to your example of sending 10 to maybe do tests to see what's working. We absolutely can't handle those types of volumes, but when you mentioned speed, right, and scale, like where's that balance? We have some very, very powerful tools that can really do both at the same time. And the reason why they can do both is, imagine you target your specific list, meaning you know the address to send it to. Now, think of the concept of reciprocity, right? Or how humans interact. If you're having a conversation with somebody face to face and one person has very kind of like stiff body language, or maybe they're scowling, versus you have the same conversation with somebody that's engaging, or is giving you the impression that you've been heard and that you've been understood. The subtle nuances of that style of communication versus sending maybe a more blanketed message to 10 people and seeing, hey, did this somewhat blanketed message work, or should I try something new? And definitely support, running tests like that. But I just want to help you guys understand, diving deeper, what you can actually customize on these messages. And the whole goal here is to make the recipient feel as if you're writing to them, not at them. And the way that you can do that is taking a look at what data is available. So that can be things like, if you're a realtor and using this tool, maybe we can find data about how long they've owned the home. Maybe there's data surrounding their age, different aspects of the specific home. So let's say if you're a realtor and you had an opportunity to go knock on someone's door, you're face to face. What do you think is going to work better? Saying, hi, my name's Dan. I'm a really nice realtor in your area. I'd love to talk to you about selling your home if you were to ever consider it. Or if you knew those data points, would you rather have a conversation that said, hey, my name's Dan. I've been watching the neighborhood. I see that you have a 3-bedroom home. You purchased it back in 2012. I bet you've got a lot of equity, and I have a buyer that's looking for this exact style, right? Imagine the difference in how that's received. And you can add so much value just making people feel that they've been heard or understood.
Yeah.
And that those data points, those can change the messaging for each individual person. So Sarah gets a letter that says, hey, I've watched, kept an eye on your property, and I've got a buyer who's interested in a 3-bedroom home, etc. And then Ryan, you get a letter that says, I have a family that's looking for a 5-bedroom home. All of that is automated and programmable. So we really can get this done quickly at surprising scale.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And so as far as like what makes a great campaign, I think we kind of narrowed it down, right? We have a contact. We know who the target is. We adjust the message to fit the target. I love the talking to you, not at you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And that needs to be the way that you think about the email, like, or the way that you think about the content on a postcard. Very similar when I'm doing email marketing, I kind of push my team. I'm like, this has to sound like I typed it with my thumbs. Therefore, when I'm typing an email from my iPhone using my thumbs, I don't actually make it look all sexy. I don't load in a bunch of stuff. I don't have templates and all that stuff. I literally am like, hey, Sarah, I hope you're having a great day. I bet that you're concerned about X, Y, or Z that I heard about in your neighborhood. And if you'd like some help, here's my insight on it. I'd love to talk to you about it. It sounds like I'm talking to a friend, not that I'm on TV broadcasting.
Yep.
And just even the tone of that content makes a huge difference. But we tend to put on our marketing hat, which makes us seem like we're like Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Like we're an announcer.
That's the person that's got this body language, right?
Yeah.
It's palpable in the air. It's off-putting. That's why
I like to think of this as human to human marketing. You're a human, you're marketing to another human. How would a human write this to another human? Or friend to friend, where you're like, I want to be your friend. What would a friend say? And most likely when you use that way to judge whether it's direct mail or email or social, you would throw out a whole lot of stuff that sounds very salesy. very much
Mhm.
commission breath, very much on your toes, not on your heels, not leading with value, not trying to help, not offering knowledge and insight, but hey, I want to be your person who lists this house, which I'll be honest, saying that everybody in the world knows that means you want to earn a commission. There is no buyer or no seller right now that doesn't know when a real estate agent says, I want to list your house, they're saying, I want to get paid.
Right.
Like it's the same. You may as well say, because I make a lot of money when I'm the listing agent, it's way easier than being the buyer's agent. Like we all get that as buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
And so that message of, I try to challenge Sarah to send messages that you're like, nobody else would send this message and they barely know you're a real estate agent. So a lot of those like on door hangers or postcards would be something like, I see that you've been in the house a long time and I bet that your spouse is saying we need an upgrade because this house isn't as sexy and cool as the newer houses I'm seeing. And perhaps you need to decide, whether you want to fix it up and sell it or fix it and keep it. And here's an Amazon link to a list of the new cool furnishings that you could update your house with that would make it gold and black instead of brown and tan. Go check them out. And something as simple as that really gets at, oh, that's what we've been talking about, how dated our house looks. We could just fix it up. Seems weird for a real estate agent to suggest fixing up your house and staying.
Yeah.
But that actually is what a friend would do if they were being like actually helpful with you. They would be saying, hey, maybe you can just fix it up and you'll love your house instead of selling it all. And surprisingly enough, that turns into more real estate leads than being aggressive.
Because some people don't want to go through the hassle of that.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that very interesting. And I have similar conversations with people all day long, trying to understand how to leverage this type of thing. And it's funny you said write it as you would to a friend, because the exercise I ask people to go through is taking a look at what data we have, hard data, and then assumed data or industry knowledge that you possess, and just take a look at what is in front of you and imagine that you're writing a letter to one person on your list, right? Just imagine that you actually are their friend. What would you say to them? And then go back and look at your copy and say, okay, does the data I have support this? Does this seem reasonable and correct? If you start to check those boxes off and they're yes, 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 you can then write that same message to the next person on the list with the same authenticity, because we have the data to back it up. So the person receiving it, they still get the letter from a friend, but you've just made a whole lot more friends yourself, right?
For sure.
Well, and surprisingly enough, we don't need completely one-to-one. You need one-to-one that you send similar people. And that's probably the best way to think about the actual flow, like how I do email. I'm writing what you just described. I'm writing this email to one person. I have them in mind. Then I say, are there 100 people like this person that I could send it to based off of whatever data or demographics? Therefore, hit send. It feels one-to-one to everybody. But when we start for whatever reason and we go, I'm going to send this to 1,000 people, we instantly shift our tone and the words we use. And we put on this marketer hat. And all of a sudden it skews everything. The intent, I think, is surprisingly for a writer, the intent of how you set your energy before you start working actually makes all the difference in the world compared to, and that just seems hokey, but like what you said, sitting down and saying, what if I was writing this to this one person? Now just duplicate and adjust, surprisingly gets overlooked by every single marketer I run into.
Yeah. Another interesting story specifically about that, Brian, is I had a realtor using the Lettr for find to locate properties for his client to buy. And they had a very specific area that they were interested in. It was a building, in fact. So there were, like 150 units in this condominium building. And the campaign that he sent was essentially just cold outreach. One letter, pretty much just saying, hey, if you're interested in selling your condo, raise your hand and give me a call. I have a buyer. But the bulk of the messaging was the same, right? Meaning We swapped out the obvious variables like mentioning the address, things of that nature. So for the most part, everybody got 80% the same message. But what we did to differentiate is we wanted the recipients to really feel like, hey, this is a real opportunity, because in fact it was. So we actually listed on there details about each specific unit, because we were able to locate, hey, is it the 2-bedroom unit? Is it the 3-bedroom? And the message read something like, I have a family who's really interested in the 2-bedroom in this building. And the funny thing is he got people reaching out, but the one he decided to share with me was somebody who was not interested in selling their condo, but they had a different property that they were getting ready to list, and he was so impressed with the links that he was going to for his client that he's like, this person is going to be a great partner to help me with what I need to accomplish, right? So that again, circling back to the idea of reciprocity, when people feel heard or understood, your results and how you connect with people, it just exponentially skyrockets.
Yeah, I mean,
We see it time and time
outside
again.
of like Starbucks and Apple, almost nobody has ever said, I want to refer my good friend to a business because of how great they are at mass marketing.
Right.
Said nobody ever. Almost all referrals are, and in fact, you can look at it when you go look at, say, your favorite restaurant, you go look at your favorite software provider, you read through the positive comments, the 4- and 5-star comments, you will almost always see it's not just the food, it's the service.
Individual experience.
It's an individual experience with somebody there. Like my software company that does hiring software, if you go read our Capterra reviews, over 50% of all the reviews mention the support team, not the software. And so what they're really saying is these people took care of me, not their software is better than other software. But we think that that's what it is. It's us versus our competitor, when in actuality, referrals come from a personal connection of trust, passing that on to say you can trust them to take care of it. There's a bunch of data on whether it was, I think there's a book on Ritz-Carlton, and Ritz-Carlton found that the most loyal customers actually weren't the ones that had a perfect stay. They were the ones that something got messed up and they fixed it. Because if you think about it, a perfect stay, you don't engage with another human, but a problem has to do with engaging with another human who solved it just for you.
I feel it's like that in the restaurant business. Like when I was a waitress 20 years ago, of like when you have an issue and you like have a manager or someone that's like ready to be there and like make it right, like you go and tell everyone about it, but yet you just as easily could have gone and went and told everyone that you had a terrible experience.
But again, that doesn't scale, it replicates. And that's probably the way to think about the difference, replicating versus scale. Scale is, I need to start with 10,000 and blast. Replicating is, I start with 1 and I do it more often over and over again. I do it residually versus scale. And that's probably, you still get to sending 1,000 cards, but you started with 1 and replicated into that segment or that target. And while that seems like you end up at the same result, the beginning really, really matters when it comes to marketing or sales.
Well, that's what I like with being able to have that such specific data. Like one of the campaigns that I did, I had just recently listed a house and it happened to be in my parents' neighborhood, and they live in a 55 and older community. And so I had someone that was wanting to purchase the house that I had listed, but it was already sold. And so I essentially had another client that was looking in that area. Now I could have gone and targeted, several 55 and older communities and said, hey, I have a buyer and they're looking for this, this, and this. But I decided to do just that one complex. And so I think it was like 70 houses or something. And I literally went and said like, hey, this is Sarah Smith with such and such. I just listed Susan and so-and-so's house down the street. But I have a client that's looking for the same. I see that you have been in your home more than 7 years. And I was just curious if you'd like to know, the value of your home and if you would entertain a conversation about selling. And that is a lot. It's personalized, but it's also not as pushy of like, hey, I need a commission. This is like, I'm trying to solve a problem and maybe I'm solving one of your problems as well.
How many, let's see, how many you've got, we just put a sign in that same space.
So I got in that campaign, I think I sent out about 70. I got 5 scans of people requesting, like wanting to know like the value of their home. And I have gotten 3 listings from it total. And I have a couple of other people that I've had conversations with and like talked to them, where I think down the road it could be, again, like they weren't actively looking for a real estate agent, but they were in like compelled to at least reach out to me and be like, yeah, like tell me what you've got, what's going on. So
But
I was
we were in that
astounded.
neighborhood 3 days ago, putting up a sign for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, you had 3 conversations with 3 random people walking on the street that stopped and talked to us.
Yep.
Not that we stopped and engaged with, because again, when you scale it down, now you could geofence that neighborhood too. You could stack up a bunch of other stuff into that neighborhood, but that's even like a low signage neighborhood.
Mhm.
Like you can't
You
just
can't put up
throw a
like
giant
your
banner.
big signs and stuff. And so it's been amazing being able to have that targeting ability in an area, because I can't have like a big sign in front of everyone. It has to be very discreet.
So
Right.
So direct mail, how do, like, what's the barrier to entry? If somebody from a real estate standpoint said, hey, I want to test this out, I want to run handwritten cards with you guys, like, what are the steps to actually like send a campaign? What does it take to try it out, etc.? Give us a little like the 60-second elevator pitch on that.
Yeah, so executing the campaign is extremely easy. We have a web application on our website at lettrlabs.com. That's LETTR labs.com. And you would just simply manage your campaigns in there, and most people can get through it in about 5 minutes or less. It walks you through step by step how you can write your messaging, how you can customize it. There are tutorial videos in there. So executing it is very easy. And of course, you could reach out to myself and ask questions to get started. But generally speaking, you need to start with a list, either something that you're going to pull from your own CRM, or maybe you have past clients, or if you need help building lists, we can do that for you and work with you to determine what type of list, how large, what type of people do we need on there, etc. So once we get the basics set up, Ryan, it's very fast, and you can manage everything on our website in just a few minutes.
But you can send to a very small list, correct? It doesn't, you don't have a bunch of minimums and things like that.
So the best entry point for most realtors, Sarah, is going to be our subscription model. And
Okay.
the benefit of that is you have more flexibility, right? Meaning you could send a handful, like the 70 that you sent, or you could do much larger campaigns in the thousands, or some people even do tens of thousands. So the subscription model gives you that flexibility, and essentially you have different monthly tiers, and we have some pretty low entry points to make it accessible to everyone. I believe it starts at $100 per month. And as you send our products, whether that be the postcards or letters, it just simply reduces from that balance.
Okay.
So you get the flexibility there. And then you also get lower per piece prices compared to doing, let's say, like a single volume order.
I see.
What's the normal turnaround time like from the time somebody loads up a message in a data model and says send to like it actually hitting the street, right? That it's actually showing up in somebody's box.
So the turnaround time once an order has been submitted, production would be 24 to 48 hours. Anybody in our subscription plan does take priority. So we adhere very tightly to those turn times. The United States Postal Service, depending on where you're sending it in the country, delivery times are 2 to 4 days. So it is feasible to get a campaign executed and then delivered within the same week, maybe spilling over to 6 days if you're going from the West Coast to the East Coast, something like that.
Gotcha. Very cool.
But it's very, very quick.
And can you just give us like an
is,
average cost of, about what does this send? And then maybe even like just kind of show us what it looks like on there to kind of see what it is that the people would be getting.
Yeah, so we can take a look at the subscription plans and what each of them have for the per unit price. Absolutely. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can share my screen here.
I just think it's important to note that, like, again, like I've done some campaigns which I feel like work well, but I've used other services that they have like the handwriting font, which I think is a great way to do it if you don't have something like this. But it really does make a difference when it actually looks like it came in an envelope with a stamp on it and it looks like it was written with a pen because it actually was. Like there is a difference in the way that your brain receives that when you open it up, don't you think?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that here in just a second. I'll pull it up and we'll do a review together.
I think it's important to note too, like we've talked a lot about real estate, but like I know that Ryan works with a lot of other companies out there as well. And we've been brainstorming ideas on how to utilize this in other niches and avenues. And I feel like there's a ton of opportunity in other business models as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we work with a lot of real estate agents, Sarah. There's no industry that we turn away, right? The
Right.
reality is everybody has a use case for communicating more authentically with their prospects. Everything from e-commerce, nonprofits, venture capitalists, I mean, you name it. Everybody can use this stuff and leverage it in different ways, of course. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
All right, perfect. So this is a representation of our monthly subscription plans. And as I mentioned, very low barrier to entry here, starting at just $100. And Sarah, I know that you said you've tried this similar service with other companies in the past, and one of the biggest roadblocks that we heard from you and not only everybody else is much higher entry points
Yes.
with, in most cases, something like a 6 or 12 month contract.
Mhm.
So our entry point is much more accessible, starting at just $100. And our subscription plan requires no contracts whatsoever. You
Yeah, that's
can
awesome.
cancel at any time. And if you don't utilize the full amount of credits that you have in your monthly allocation, those will roll over to the next month. So you don't lose them. And if you decided you wanted to cancel, if there were any remaining credits there, you'd have 90 days to utilize them.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So we're putting our best foot forward to make sure that everybody who's at least interested in this has an opportunity to try it out. And the per unit price point of ours compared to everybody else in the space is about a third to sometimes even a half of the price point, which
Yeah.
is pretty phenomenal. So for example, if you were on the $100 per month plan, Sarah, you could send a postcard for $1.60, our medium card that is an envelope for $1.90. And then if you were at a slightly higher tier, that postcard reduces to $1.35 and the handwritten card to $1.65. And that's postage included, a physical stamp.
Yeah, that's super
Everything.
impressive. I mean, even just from like a client retention, not even from marketing, but just like think about your current database of sending out, there's Christmas cards and all these different things. But again, rather than just sending some random like happy holidays, actually giving them something of value that's directed directly at them, like $1.30 or $1.60 for client outreach of your current database is amazing.
Yeah, and conversation I have very frequently with realtors is about postcard mailing. Most of them are aware of postcard campaigns. It's pretty common in the real estate industry. If people haven't done it themselves, they've heard about it. And the overwhelming reality is many people don't do it effectively, and they have antiquated thought on that type of more traditional mailing, um, assuming that that's similar process or result that they're going to receive with our product. And so the very first question I ask any realtor is, have you ever done a mail campaign before? if they say yes or if they say no, my answer is same. And that answer is, more often than not, you have limited or no targeting ability, meaning there's a lot of wasteful spend. Go to any zip code and Google the ratio of homeowners versus renters in any area. So people say, yeah, I've sent postcards before. They just didn't really do it for me. And then I ask, okay, what did that cost you to send that postcard? Typically, if they're using the cheaper options like every door direct mail, maybe around 60 to 65 cents, somewhere in there, right? And so when they look at what we offer, they're like, oh, that's crazy. I didn't get the return and it's double the cost. Then when I say, hey, if you're not able to target, half your spend is wasted out the door from the day you clicked the order button.
Right.
Because you're not targeting the right people.
For
And
sure.
then from there, everything we already talked about, being able to customize the message to the individual, the medium that it's written with, a real pen on paper that's indistinguishable from human writing. It's got variations in characters. We program ours to be a little messy, right? Our robots are not professional calligraphers, and that's intentional. If anybody ordered a product sample, you'd be able to see line spacing varies. Things aren't
Do you have
perfectly
an
perfect.
example that you could show us?
Yes, I can show you a photo here in a moment. Let me hop over to the products here.
Okay, perfect.
Let me zoom in here. And I can send you guys some photos after our call that you could take a look at
Yeah,
as
that's
well,
awesome.
some higher resolution photos. Can you see this all right?
Yeah. Very cool.
So here on this part in the center, you can see the subtle curve on the indentations there. So it's not perfect, right? Characters vary even within the same word, right? So the letter E is going to be written at a slightly different angle. There are going to be subtle imperfections that are programmed into our writing, which we have 60 different handwriting styles to choose from. Then our software goes in and it's AI, meaning there are certain parameters and then it randomizes.
Yeah.
So every single letter, in fact, is unique. With the same data inputs, you compare one that came before or after another letter, side by side. Let's say you send the same thing to a neighbor. They go, hey, I got this letter. I wonder if they actually wrote me. And they go get together and they compare them. They will be different. No letter is going to be the same.
That's cool.
Which is really, really cool.
And I'd say data can come down to three main things. Number one, what type of data is available for targeting? Meaning, how do I find the right target? How do I get that information, etc.? Data point number two, what is the right number to send to really know whether it's working or not? Like validation of a test. And number three is, how do I measure success?
Right.
What is the data behind this was successful or not? So maybe let's start with the first one, which is what data is available. And normally you start with this, you need to segment cold versus warm versus existing clients. So the easiest one right off the bat is pick up this thing and send an email or send a letter, send a handwritten postcard to your existing client base, to people you've done transaction with in the past. You're going to get a very high engagement rate because they know you. They already know, like, and trust you. You're just reminding them that you care. That's different than a warm one, which would be export out of your CRM of people that you've gathered over time and send to them versus buying a cold list. And the reason why that segmentation is important is to figure out where the data is coming from. When you're buying a cold list, there's tons of data brokers that can give you all kinds of cold list information, whether it's for sale by owners or new listings or expired listings or you name it, right?
And they can do all of that.
And so we can get the data from you on that. But so the very first thing is knowing what data is available and where does it come from? And also, like, what is the context of that data? So for you guys, you want to talk a little bit here, what kind of data is available and specifically what kind of segmentation is available?
Yeah, great setup there, Ryan. So in terms of the real estate industry, most realtors are probably already aware, data points that are basic are available in many places. If you needed help gathering that, we here at Lettr Labs can help you with that. Beyond the standardized things like making sure you're sending to a homeowner, right? We can start looking at different demographics. We can look at the likelihood of children present in the home. We can even look at interests, or maybe are they a pet owner, right? So the way that we target in the direct mail case is so much different than what you would do with online advertising. The easiest way I can explain it is everybody online has their own data, right? Google doesn't share with Facebook. Every different platform tries to hold on to all their data, right? Because data is king, of course. So recent changes in Apple's iOS and other, security permissions online and making it more difficult to identify people in the digital space. When we're talking about something analog like direct mail, we have access to multiple different data brokers who use data points based on verified purchase history. So what that means is if you're somebody who visits Petco frequently or buys baby food, data points on your spending habits, right? Because all the credit card companies, they want to know what you're buying. The data's out there. It's all around us. We all have it. Those data points that we share every day, just by using our credit cards. So we can get hyper focused in our targeting beyond what most people even realize is possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the goal of targeting isn't just I want to target qualified people, which the better your targeting of the list, the more likely your response rate goes up. But it's also dictates what kind of message you're going to send. If you know they're buying Pampers, your messaging has to do with, is your family expanding, your house needs to too, right? That's different than a different data point. So then that brings us like your messaging is tied to your target. So then the next part is what type of data, like what's a relevant test case? And the answer is clearly going to be, well, it depends. And the way to unpack a relevant test case from a statistics standpoint is going back to where did your data come from?
Right.
Do they already know you, love you, trust you, or they've never even heard of you at all? What is your messaging? How good is the message connect to that target audience you're engaging? And what's your call to action? What do you want them to perform? Where a lot of people get messed up is they think, well, I'm doing branding. I'm doing brand marketing. Brand marketing is what rich people do.
Like
who can
Pepsi
afford, like Pepsi and Coke. And the way you measure the effectiveness of a brand marketing campaign is before I sent it, what percentage of people knew my company name if I brought it up? And after I sent it, what percentage of people knew my company name when I called them? Here's the key though, is the way you judge whether it was effective was when I called them, did they know me? And that's not the goal. The goal of direct response marketing is that you're not calling them and them going, oh my gosh, I've gotten 4,000 of your postcards. I do know who you are. You want them to engage and respond to you. You want them to take an action.
For sure.
Versus you. And so the question is, you could start with as little as 10 cards. If I was sending them to my client base of people who I know, like, and trust, and they know, like, and trust me, because the chances of, I could start with one card if I was sending it to my mom, right? My mom is going to respond to one card.
Right.
My clients that I work with every month are going to respond maybe 1 out of 10. But if I send it to just random people in a city I don't even live in, where there's no brand at all, talking about nothing with a generic house on it, well, I better send like 50,000 cards, because the relevance is what it will take because of how unfiltered the list is, untargeted the list is, untargeted the content, like no call to action on it. Wouldn't that be the best way you can think about like relevance of how many do I have to send to justify whether it worked or not?
Right. Well, that's a great point. And as you said, the answer is always it depends, right? But think about it from this perspective. If we're talking about real estate specifically, very successful realtors have a, a large audience of past clients in the hundreds, maybe sometimes I've seen even higher, right? But imagining, how often are your past clients going to be transacting in real estate compared to the broader market? So you need to be realistic about what your goal is and identify, what is my objective here? If your objective is to drive revenue, you're correct that, Ryan, that you might get more engagement from people that know you, but that's far less likely to drive the type of revenue that you would have available to you in terms of like a cold outreach, right?
Right.
So especially with something that's such a high ticket item like real estate, I don't know what's the average home selling right now in the United States.
Oh,
I'm
I
going to
don't
ask
know in the
the
United
professional
States.
realtor
In
here.
my area, it's over 600,000. But yeah, I mean, probably nationally,
600,000.
right, $300,000 or $400,000 for
So
sure.
imagine if we set the bar very low in terms of a conversion rate. Let's just say 2%, which is about 3 times higher than your standard printed direct mail. It's not customized. It's not written with a pen. You're not speaking to the person, right? How many sales, Sarah, do you think it takes to cover a campaign of sending 1,000 letters? 2,000, 3,000, 5,000?
Not,
Doesn't
not
take
one.
much.
yeah,
A
exactly.
Most likely
Yeah,
just one,
for sure.
which is the incredible power of this type of outreach and how we can personalize it. Now, if anybody wants to use it for nurturing or following up with your past clients, absolutely do that too. But don't underestimate the power of using this as an outreach tool when we can customize it, target in the way that we can.
For sure.
What I think
especially
is
with time.
important there, though, is like having that QR code. You can create your messaging that's bringing people down to the bottom of the funnel. Like when we, track ROI, it's like, oh, how many houses did I sell? But if you're creating your messaging in a way that they're scanning for, the 5 top reasons to such and such in a neighborhood, like if depending on what the messaging is, there are going to be people that you're marketing to that are not ready to become buyers, but you can still track and share messaging that's going to push them down that funnel so that they will eventually become a buying customer. So when you're doing a campaign like this, it's not necessarily this like immediate, oh my gosh, I sold 20 houses. You just need to realize and be able to track that you're making progress. They read the article that you were sending to them, or they clicked on this link, or they started a question in their mind about whether or not they were tired of having, doing their lawn care. Maybe they should move somewhere else in the next year. So you can't just send out one postcard and expect to get an immediate ROI. It is a process that you're nurturing that client to the point where they become a buying customer.
Yes, absolutely true. And with any marketing, more touch points with relevant messaging will always give you a better result in the long term. We've had clients that do get an instant result just from a single letter, right? And if they combine that into a multiple step campaign, you're going to be, like you. Yeah, how many listings did you get off one? And now that might not happen every single time, right? But statistically, if you look at the numbers and like what is a realistic conversion rate, and what is the average sale of a home, the mathematics in the real estate industry really are weighted in the realtor's favor for this type of marketing campaign. So
yeah, and that's really, if you want the core takeaway of a data conversation about what is good and what is bad and what does it take and what should I do, the answer is always going to be not just it depends. What people are saying when they say it depends is it's not that simple. There are a lot of working parts, and if you zoom out and understand the entire, this is just algebra, which not the accountants want to hear it, but maybe not the real estate agents. Marketing has an underlying algebraic equation. How good is my target? How good is my content? How often am I touching them? How good is the physical piece? How unique is it compared to everything else? I measure it in, there's 4 parts to it. It's how unique is this compared to everything else? How relevant is it? That would be, does it relate to me? How compelling is it? Is what you're talking about like a level 1 pain for me, or is it like oh, it'd be cool to talk about? and how credible is it? And when you think about those four parts, that impacts that equation of what, and then what is my potential return? Like, so if I only get $100, lawn care sale, well, then that equation is going to have to be different than when I get a $10,000 commission. And so really you need to sit down and think about it both from the user journey, take your target audience, walk through what are their pains, what would trigger them, what kind of things can I say that will engage them and make them feel heard and make them feel, etc., that will cause them, from a call to action concept, what is a logical call to action for them to take and how likely are they to do it? And then just mathematically, actually breaking down the math of this campaign to be able to say, no, I'm being realistic here. Because my output is 10 grand of potential, then it's logical to believe it's going to take more than 10 cents to get there. If my output is $50, well, then I might not be able to make the math work and I should try something different.
Yeah.
And so it really is this psychology plus analytical part of the psychology of the person that you're engaging, and the analytics part of, there's a mathematical equation that gives you the boundaries of what will make sense and what will work and how to compute if it worked.
Yeah. Well, as you said, those are some great pillars of it depends, right?
Yeah.
What I can promise you guys is, in terms of the delivery method, we have you covered. There's nothing more unique than a handwritten letter or a postcard. In terms of the quality, we've got you covered there. Our co-founder is a Stanford graduate robotics engineer.
Nice.
He used to work on the Hyperloop project, designing the train that goes 800 miles an hour.
Cool.
So our technology is top notch. Our software is top notch. So we have all of those tools built and ready for you. The only other variable there is, put your sales hat on when you get the call or when the lead comes through the QR code. That's where you have to take over.
Yep.
And you also got to figure out, hey, you're the industry expert. What is the messaging that's going to resonate? We're here to help you, right? But
And
we can
we're
only
here to
drop the
help
ship
too.
so much.
Like, that's one of the things that we like to do, is help people with their messaging too. So I think between the two of us together, we could probably come
And that
up with
really
some
is why we
great
partner up,
campaigns.
why we partner up with somebody like you guys. I don't want to go build the technology. I don't want to go and build that portion. On the other hand, we are really, really good at the psychological part of, if you give us a list with set demographics, that we can come up with messaging that resonates and will be unique and credible and relevant on the messaging side. And then coming up with a logical call to action that has enough fuel and little enough friction. Right.
And what's cool about your guys' campaigns is what's working. Like, for what you guys have been doing, you're seeing the return that, people in other areas are getting. And so what messaging is working as well, which is awesome. Very neat.
Well, excellent. Well, this was super interesting. Hopefully, if you have interest in this, I'm sure that wherever you're watching this video, there's a description. Go down in there, you'll see links to where you can learn more, links to some special offers. If you want to learn more specifically about how Sarah does it, hit up Sarah. She will show you some of her templates, some of her examples. We'll be unpacking different variations based off of if you want to target X, here's the content I use, here's how I run and send it out. And so, but thanks so much for your time. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. And if anybody had any questions, they can email me directly. It's just dan@lettrlabs.com. And thank you guys again so much. Hope to chat with you again soon.
Perfect.
Thanks for your time today. We'll talk to you soon.